Great. Welcome to our next session about the future of brands and how they can succeed on a global stage. Now, if the future of brands lie within the hearts and minds of their consumers, then they had better understand their core demographic, a demographic that lives and breathes social media, instant messaging, video games, live streaming, and often all at the same time. So Gen Z are the ultimate adapters, and their habits are now influencing behaviors in millennials and Gen X, and even the younger generation following them. So hello everyone, my name is Vivian Paxinas. I'm the General Manager for UNiDAYS. I oversee growth, our growth function globally, and it's my job to bring brands into the orbit of one of the most elusive consumer groups in history. For context, UNiDAYS has 17 million verified Gen Z users worldwide who have spent more than 5 billion through our app since 2018. We know that Gen Z is a hyper-informed, hyper-connected consumer who expects customized, personalized products and services and value across every device, every platform. And we know the real world and digital existence are basically one and the same. So brands must urgently connect with this unfamiliar digital native consumer who's defining social commerce. And many marketeers find this new world order daunting, but not the marketeers who are joining me today. So here to talk about how brands can succeed with a smart, savvy, and fickle consumer globally is Matt Pullington, Director of Marketing Performance of one of Europe's fastest growing furniture, homeware, and homeware retail companies, Made.com, and Andy Pilkington, Media Director for Europe for the iconic sportswear brand Adidas. Welcome to you both. So guys, we started a few minutes late, so we're going to jump right in. Why don't you just start with some quick introductions and tell our audience what it is you do?
Shall I kick off? I'll kick off.
Kick off, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, great to be here. Thanks for that intro, Viv. Just a quick download of Made for anyone that might not be familiar with our brand. We're the leading digitally native lifestyle brand in homewares and furniture, and the most popular home and living brand for UK millennials. Business was founded in 2010, launched first in the United Kingdom, gradually expanding products through upholstery, furniture, and more recently homeware and lifestyle categories. In parallel, relevant to conversation today, we've also expanded internationally with most of the continental European countries having launched through 2013 through to Spain, which most recently launched in 2018. So my role at Made is customer demand. Really, our mantra as a team is to influence and drive more customers to choose Made more often. And so within my team, I've got experts across media buying, measurement, performance marketing, customer experience, customer marketing.
Great, thanks so much, Matt. Andy, over to you.
So hi everyone, great to be here. Hopefully everyone knows who Adidas are, or at least a little bit about the brand. I think for the purposes of today, it's just worth touching on the fact that obviously we're a brand that have been around for quite a long time, and traditionally we sold reasonably indirectly to the consumer, and we worked with wholesale partners essentially to be our retail arm. And we still do that, and that's still the majority of our sales. But increasingly, over the last 10 or 15 years, we've been selling increasingly directly to our consumer, both on the high street and within our own direct-to-consumer e-commerce operation. So we're a business that kind of spans some of the world that Matt's just been talking about in terms of selling directly and selling to that young new consumer, but also comes from a more traditional background and a more traditional structure. A little bit very quickly about myself. I've been at Adidas for 5 years. I'm based in Amsterdam. My role is European Media Director. So that essentially means that I'm responsible for our media strategy and how we plan, buy and measure our media within Europe. Ultimately, that means I'm accountable for the business results that media is meant to achieve. And that's both in terms of the short-term commercial results, but also in terms of what we're achieving in the longer term for our brand and building long-term brand value around Adidas as a proposition.
Great, thanks both. So Andy, let's start with you. I've got two questions in one. Let's start with talking about some of the trends and behaviors we've seen over the last 12 months. So how has consumer psychology towards brand changed over the last 12 months? And as a result, what are some of the key changes that you've seen in your brand performance globally?
Well, I think in terms of consumer psychology towards brands, I'm not sure whether it's altered a huge amount over the last 12 months. I think as marketeers, we're often guilty of thinking that consumers maybe care a little bit more about brands than they actually do. However, I do think branding has become more important in a way because of some of the behavioral shifts that we've seen. So we've seen a lot of new consumers go into an e-commerce environment, maybe for the first time, or maybe buying from a particular category for the first time online. And when that happens, I think trust becomes absolutely essential. When you've got a consumer that might be a little more skeptical of buying from a distance and not being able to touch an item, having that large brand equity to back you up, and that trust really helps. And clearly we've seen a massive sales channel shift caused by high street store closures, and with that move to e-commerce and that acceleration, I think that the role of brands has become even more important in terms of driving that trust. I also think we've seen some obvious product changes or demand changes at Adidas. Some of the things that you might expect. So the lifestyle and kind of leisure wear category, which was already doing very well, has gone from strength to strength. Equally, some of the more teamwear based stuff, not so much, just because participation has been down. And I think we're gradually coming out of that. But you've seen some quite obvious kind of product demand shifts that we've had to supply for. But in general, very positive for us, because consumers are more concerned about both their wellness and working out, but also being comfortable while working from home. And luckily, we cater to both of those things.
Absolutely, yeah. And Matt, what are some of the changes that you have seen over the last 12 months, if we think about the changes in Europe for you?
Well, it feels like Andy's dressing everyone and we're furnishing everyone. So I think no, I think there's kind of three things that I would say that have been really interesting to observe and learn from over the last kind of 12 to 18 months. I think the regional and geographical one is quite interesting. I think regional differences are obviously going to be there because different regions, cities, countries are going to have started that that online penetration, that online mix at different stages, to Andy's point. So for example, at Made, we've seen that demand, particularly on the continent as well, has spread to more rural areas outside of our traditional kind of strongholds of the towns and cities. But I think more than anything, it's been an interesting 12 months for international and global business, is navigating the nuances of regional flavors, if you like. I mean, I think we were joking yesterday, weren't we, Andy, that the French Black Friday 2020 will be forever ingrained in our memories. I couldn't even tell you what date it ended up happening, but it moved in line with demands of the consumer, demands of retailers, and needs of and the needs of of society, and it really did push us, and I'd imagine a lot of advertisers and brands to be increasingly agile. I think the other one that I'd echo that Andy mentioned was category. I think certainly from a Made.com perspective, it's the status of home has changed, right? Fundamentally, our relationship with the home has changed. It's become a lot more things to a lot of different people than it was before. It's an office, a gym, break room, on top of all of the kind of other things that it was before, and the categories that we particularly perform well in. So my view and our view, I think, is people will continue to spend on their home, and more disposable income will be allocated to it as that relationship has become, they've become closer, essentially, consumers in their homes. And that's really reflected in the category, right? As I say, the shift to online marketing, certainly in our category, is accelerated. It's at a real inflection point. It feels like it's where fashion and electronics was kind of 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the final one I'd say, which I think is really interesting, it's really important for us as a brand as well, and I know that Andy's got a strong opinion on this as well, is around sustainability. We've been very conscious as a business, as I know many businesses have, to extend our focus on design into making better business choices to really minimize our impact on people and on the planet, from kind of setting sourcing goals through to product circularity. So we've launched a range of initiatives that surround how we can support customers to make more responsible choices with, for example, donating their old furniture.
Yeah. And has that angle around sustainability been accelerated because of the last 12 months, or it was always in the plans for Made?
So I think it's not something that's been accelerated as such. We've had from our perspective, our proposition is we're vertically integrated, so we source and work very closely with our manufacturing partners. So we've got really strong control over that supply chain. So we know. We've got a great sense and pulse of everything that's going on, and so it's just enabled us to present that to the consumer as well.
Great. And thank you. And Andy, given that consumer behavior has become more democratized, particularly when I think about Gen Z and millennial, where they want brands to really personalize experiences tailored to their wants and need, how does Adidas accommodate to those needs?
So I think there's multiple things behind that. One is from a product perspective, ensuring that we are as close to the consumer as we can possibly get, particularly within sportswear and fashion in general. Trends can move quite quickly and it's easy to miss them. So, and to your point about fragmentation, if there are lots of different lots of different groups with potentially different needs, it's easy to miss part of the market. So I think one of the big things
around. How do you stay close to them, Andy? Sorry, just to pick on that point. How do you stay as close as possible to them?
Well, I think it's various combinations of research techniques, but also increasingly, rather than just doing a research study, it's actually trialing stuff in the field. So it's about being able to get product into market quicker. So one of the key tenets of our last 5-year strategy was speed, and that's basically being able to launch product quickly. And that's one example, but it's really being able as a business to turn things around quicker, and also, it's very much a cliche, but be prepared in certain areas to fail a few times before you get it right. And I think obviously there's a lot that you can get out of traditional and more non-traditional research techniques, but there's an increasing ability, especially with brands that have a direct link with the consumer via a membership base like we do, for example, to test ideas in the real world as well as in the abstract, and we're looking to do that wherever we can. I think that the second part for us is membership, and what membership really allows us to do is understand each consumer. I wouldn't say individually, because that's not realistic, and it's not. I think we think of it less as personalization and more in terms of like cohorts and groups, but many more groups than we would traditionally think about on a media plan or on a general marketing plan. So a deeper segmentation, and what membership allows us to do is understand more about what each person is buying, when they're buying it, and what generally their motivations and patterns of consumption are. And this is not new, like supermarkets have been doing this for a long time, but it's newer for fashion brands and for a lot of e-com brands. But being able to do that, I think, allows us to make sure that our offering isn't like a one size fits all, this is what you get. it allows us to tailor it appropriately to the many different groups and many different types of demand that we have.
Yeah, I love that about your point around staying close to the consumer. Something that we do at UNiDAYS, which is at the core of what we do, is speak to our students, our audience on a daily basis. We've got our student council. We ask them for their input, how they're feeling towards brand, how they're feeling, like what are they going through emotionally as students, and all of that factors into our marketing and our growth strategy as well. I just want to shift a little bit and talk about brand growth and innovation. So Matt, I'll just start with you. So everyone talks about innovation, but how does it really manifest itself practically for Mage, and how has it manifested itself over the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big area, isn't it? I mean, innovation could be everything from advertising, supply chain. I think, from my perspective, and I guess in my world and my view is, our ambition as a brand really is to redefine furniture and homeware shopping by creating exciting digital first experiences to really connect with our customers. We know our digitally native shopper. We know who they are. We know that they're on a journey to curate in their own way, similar to, as I said, those trends that we've seen in historically in other spaces, and more so using their home as a space and a means of expressing kind of individual tastes and styles, which is really exciting to see. And you particularly feel that when you look at the amount of kind of homewares influencers that are growing on Instagram, and what the growth of Pinterest over the last 12 months. I think one of the ways that comes to life that I think is really interesting, particularly in this category, is augmented reality. For us, it's proven to be a really meaningful tool in helping customers really engage with our product and really immerse kind of in the experience and comfort of their own home. And we've been experimenting a lot with it. From our app and our mobile site, you'll find augmented reality experiences available for much of our product catalogue. We really want customers to be kind of engaging with that, as I say, digital first experience, because we're not geographically, we don't have like a kind of physical geographical presence very widely. And actually, we've also extended that into advertising recently as well. So we've been working with several partners, namely Facebook, to actually create those augmented reality experiences in feed and off of our platform, which has proven really fruitful for us, particularly around developing brand metrics. The other one I'd say, more of a reactive piece was around our physical locations. We do have showrooms in major cities across Europe. And obviously, in line with local guidelines, we had to pivot, same as many brands did, to those not being available, right? And so we had the opportunity really to quickly kind of pivot and expand our online appointment proposition, which proved really, really popular with customers. Again, playing really nicely on that curation point that I've mentioned. So customers were able to kind of get their own bespoke mood boards. We got some amazing videos of some of our staff in stores jumping on sofas, showing how bouncy they were, and really kind of helping customers kind of make the right decisions around their product. And as I say, it responded really well with our customers. And I think, just on that point, I think I really anticipate that the future of retail, certainly for us, will be a blend of that kind of physical and digital experience. And for us, it's really kind of challenging that status quo. You don't need to be in a store, but also, we need to have that digital first point for customers, and we need to give them the opportunity to bring it to life as much as possible in fun ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all the innovation that's come out of this situation over the last 12 months. When you're forced to think about it in a different way, that's when innovation comes really comes to life, right? As we all have over the last 12 months. Thank you. Andy, what does innovation look like for Adidas going forward? So in terms of the future?
Yeah, I think, well, the first thing I'd say, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word innovation, because
I know many people
totally
do.
behind it. And at the same time, I think something I keep hearing is that the most innovative thing you can do at the moment is not have innovation as one of your brand pillars, because basically every single brand has it. But I do believe that, you know, doing things different to do them better is fundamentally how you succeed. And clearly the pace of change is going up, not down. So the pressure to do that is rising, not falling. We've actually been doing a little bit of work, and it sounds a bit negative, but we've been doing some work on, you know, what innovation actually isn't and what we don't care about so much. And, you know, one of the things we've admitted to ourselves is, you know, we don't always have to be the first mover. So we don't always have to be the first brand to try a new platform or a new format. It's great if we can, but if we can't, then, you know, we'll learn from someone else that has done it and then follow on in quick succession if it's successful. And also, innovation doesn't have to be consumer facing. We can do some really, really clever things, you know, behind closed doors in the back end that has a real overall impact, but it doesn't look like super new and clever from a consumer point of view. And then the other thing we've been thinking about is, you know, innovation is very different for different brands. So obviously my world is very much media and advertising. For us to do a radio advert is actually quite innovative. Like, it's difficult for a fashion or a sports brand to work with audio or to work with podcasts, but auto brands have been doing that for years, and it's like their bread and butter. They would see it as the absolute basic of a media plan. So I think we've been doing a lot of work to kind of think about, okay, what innovation actually is, what we define it as, and how we use it to actually get better. I think the key areas we're looking at are, you know, how we break down some of the barriers within. I mean, this talk is on e-commerce, but specifically within e-commerce and with a lot of new adopters because of the pandemic, how do we break down some of those barriers? So Matt's already mentioned AR. It also has a clear use case in fashion, whether it's to see furniture in your home or to see items on your feet. That ability to see something, you know, that's an example of a consumer facing innovation. But there are also some kind of more boring innovations in logistics, like being able to get product to somebody within 24 hours and being able to offer returns in a way that is easy. Like, that's like the dull side of innovation, but that's a major barrier to e-commerce, right? Because you can't get the product quick enough, or returns are a hassle. Like, so I'm really a fan of looking at the entire picture and seeing how, you know, the company as a whole can be innovative, and some of that can be directly at the consumer, but some of it can be something that, you know, delights the consumer and gives a great experience, but is on the kind of more boring side, I think.
I really like that point, Andy. I think you should go on a crusade to glamorize supply chain innovation.
Boring innovation.
Marketing community.
That's what I do.
and you're right. I mean, one of the innovations which you touched on around deep segmentation, one of the innovations we saw over the last year is changing our approach to our CRM strategy, right? And becoming more segmented and more targeted, and making sure that we are sending those right messages to the right cohorts, you know, targeting, you know, highly engaged fashion users or highly engaged tech users. And we changed our segmentation model, which has led to more engagement, right? And that's not a consumer-facing innovation, but that's internally, that's very innovative. Like that has been really innovative for us. I want to touch on something that you said, Andy, and get both of your points of view, though. I've seen over the last year on UNiDAYS that there's been a huge bias towards performant channels, trusted performant channels like UNiDAYS, which we must get made.com on, and more investment into that performance, kind of driving conversion over the last year. You have a different point of view, Andy, which you touched on in the beginning, that branding has become more important. So talk us through how you talk us through that a little bit more, and how you've approached driving growth sustainably.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, and it was already a topic of discussion pre-COVID, but I think, like many things, COVID kind of brought it into focus and made it more urgent. But essentially, and it depends on your sector, and maybe for Matt it wasn't quite so bad, but for us, in kind of this time last year or a bit earlier last year, like the business is suddenly in a massive shock, right? As I said earlier, most of our sales come in store, and almost all the stores are closed. So suddenly you have like almost like an emergency cash flow situation where out of the blue, you're in a situation where to invest in anything over the long term is a very difficult business case to sell, because you're literally struggling to pay the bills. And that environment, essentially, that kind of cash poor environment, I think led to that focus on more performance media, essentially, because you can more clearly see a link, and someone can go to the board and say, look, give me X million euros and I can give you this many million euros back, and it will come within this timeline. And that's fine, and that might be a legitimate claim, but it's much harder in an environment like that to go in and say, give me X million euros, and 3 years down the line, I will have increased your brand equity scores by this, and this may have an impact on your top line by this over like the next 10 years. It's just a harder investment proposition to put forward, particularly in cash-strapped times. I think that the risk with that is that as brands move towards more and more performance investment and less longer-term brand investment, a lot of them became a bit imbalanced, and that's fine for a short period of time. But over the long term, I think it will end up with, brands are fundamentally the strength of performance advertising. Like, performance advertising is not as effective if you don't have a strong brand in the market. And because of that, I think brands, including ourselves, are gradually pivoting back, or in our case, more than gradually, like making quite an aggressive pivot back to more long-term brand investment. Now the immediate crisis is over, and making sure that, yes, of course, performance media has a role to play in terms of delivering our commercial results quarter on quarter. But if we don't have a strong brand in 2, 3, 4 years' time, then that growth isn't sustainable, and it's not something that, a brand that's been around as long as Adidas wants to do. So we're definitely pivoting back towards longer term brand-based investment, and we're starting to see the payoff of that. Although one of the obvious implications is that it takes a while for you to see the results. But yeah, that's where we are at the moment.
And Matt, what's your view?
Yeah, I'd say, just to build on what Andy said, I think I see it through quite a similar lens. I think the last 12, 18 months have really polarized the conversation. And I actually think it's more a conversation around how brands, advertisers had to adjust and pivot their marketing budget laydown to support whatever was going on in businesses commercially, but also the availability of media to consumers. So, for example, you're not going to run an outdoor campaign perhaps when no one's outdoors, right? Yeah. So I think it's less. My perspective is it was less about a shift to performance channels and more about a slight shift in mix and availability or effectiveness potential of mix, and also the commercial nuances of what businesses were going through, and everyone was quite unsure. I think looking forward, again, I completely agree with Andy, and you wouldn't argue with the Adidas approach overall, would you? So I'm kind of buying what you're selling, but from our perspective, it's really similar. We've got branding initiatives out in market at the minute, which talk about some of the things that I've mentioned today, particularly in Europe, where we're growing our brand and our brand awareness as a disruptor in the category. So I think it's going to become a much easier conversation to have over the next kind of half.
Great. So we've got 5 minutes left already. It's gone by quickly. So I just want to shift the focus and talk a little bit about social commerce. So we saw, again, over the last 12 months, like a boom, particularly in China, where, around live streaming and how they work with influencers to drive sales. And it's become such a big industry there. I feel like they're so far ahead of the game, and that hasn't really landed in Europe, in my point of view. Mate has built its business model engineering. It's really engineered for digital natives. Adidas attracts 150 million members to its platforms, social online platform. Social commerce is booming. So, what are your top tips for brands needing to embrace this new order? Matt, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about innovation, some of the stuff we were doing about looking to bring the experience that we deliver on our own platforms into other platforms that allows us to reach and engage with with a customer in a different way. And I think as those opportunities present themselves, we're really excited about expanding our proposition there, but I think it has to be right. I don't think my perspective and my personal perspective, I guess, is that you don't just want another shop, right? You want that experience to reflect the story that you're trying to tell as a brand and the experience that you're trying to deliver as a brand. And so I think as customization allows itself, as resources allow you as a brand to deliver that, I think it will be an interesting evolution. One place that it's perhaps a little bit more developed is in the customer contact and customer service world. We talk to customers through a lot of different channels that may down the line present us with opportunities to engage them further. Yeah.
Andy, what's your view?
Well, I'll be very quick as I know we're tight on time, but I think it's the more we can get consumers in our own controlled environment of some type, the better from our point of view, because that's where we believe we can give them the best experience. So the question for us becomes, okay, how do we get them in that environment? And really, the first point is that we need to offer them something that they can't get anywhere else. So offer them something exclusive when they are within the Adidas environment, rather than via a wholesale partner. And really, we think of it in kind of a bit old school, but it's really about recruitment and retention. So from a media point of view, how do we bring new consumers to that environment? And then from our e-com team's point of view and our CRM teams, when they're there, how do we retain them? How do we give them something new? How do we give them something that helps them or motivates them to stay around and stay engaged? So I don't know whether they're top tips, but they're the things we're focused on.
They're good tips, right? I've noticed there's quite a few questions, guys. So I'm just going to shift to try and answer some of these questions. So Andy, how do you maintain brand product trust while using new platforms to sell Adidas goods? Have you found more issues with counterfeit product?
That's like an investor question. So what I just said, like our goal, like our strategy is called Own the Game for the next 5 years. And that essentially means moving consumers into our own environments wherever possible. And trust is one of the advantages for that, because consumers know exactly what they're going to get when they buy from us directly. I'm not going to talk about counterfeiting in detail, but it's documented that that's an issue for the fashion industry, particularly in some areas of the world. And it is something that we battle against. But again, the more control we have of the sales environment, the better job we can do with that.
Yeah. This is a question to both. How has your relationship changed with agencies since the pandemic? Were you working with agencies before and now? And do you still see a need for agencies? So Matt, do you want to kick off with this one?
I mean, the short answer is, do you see a need for agencies? Yeah, of course. I think, like, when we're in terms of our operating model within my team, we're broadly in house. We've got a team of experts, media and performance marketing and measurement, as I mentioned. But there's certain things that we'll always be looking for external support on, be it planning, media buying, whatever it might be. So yeah, I absolutely feel there's a role for agencies more in the context of partnerships, mutually beneficial partnerships.
Okay. And then which market has the highest growth potential for Adidas globally?
Oh, that's definitely an investor question. Well, you can look at our financial reports, but it's not Europe, I'll tell you that.
No. Okay. And then we all talk about digital transformation. In your view, has COVID made the term obsolete and showed that transformation should go beyond digital, especially when it comes to e-commerce? Good question. Yeah. Who wants to take this one?
My view on it, just my final view on it was, it's a very consultant term, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we're all living it and breathing it, and so you know, is it obsolete? Possibly not in some areas, but I would say that we're broadly all living and breathing it. So.
Yeah, I've never found it a particularly useful phrase or construct, to be honest. I think it's reasonably obvious to businesses like where the opportunities are. And there are structural problems, probably more so for a business like Adidas than for a made.com, just because of, you know, the origins of the two different companies. But it's very clear that it's been a priority pre-COVID. COVID's accelerated that, if anything, and I don't think we need to really talk about it that much anymore because everyone's doing it.
Yeah. Great, thanks guys. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for being here today, your contribution. We've heard about the importance of staying close to the customer experience and controlling that journey as well. And we've heard about the need to innovate both in store, you know, some great examples from Matt, and using technology like AR to innovate. So hopefully we've provided the audience with some really good tips, and wishing you all a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.